JT Shaver here with New Layer, and in this video I want to show you something I didn't know that I wanted so bad until I finally got it. One of my least favorite things about filming is the time it takes to set up and tear down. Normally when I get an idea I can see it all in my head, so the time it takes to convert that from my head to real life almost seems like a waste of time. One thing that always seems to take forever, especially by yourself, is setting up external diffusion, and that's why I love the Intellytech Fast Frames. Like the name implies, these are foldable, quick setup frames that work as diffusion, negative fill, as a reflector, and more. The bigger your diffusion, the softer your shadows and lighting becomes, and that's what the majority of people are after in most cases. Bowens mount softboxes can only get so big before they become impractical, and there's a reason you don't see things like octaboxes in big budget filmmaking. Using large external diffusion can really take your lighting to the next level. There's a lot that the fast frames do well and a few things they might do better, but first I'll take a look at the good stuff. They come in two sizes, either 5 by 6.5 feet or 5 by 3.2 feet, and they're made of what I think is aluminum, so they're really lightweight. They also come in a few kits as far as materials go. The one that I use most is the Diffusion and Grid kit. It comes with the frame itself, a half-stop diffusion, an egg crate grid, 2 mounting clamps, and a carrying case. Grids are really popular with Bowens mount modifiers, but this is the first time I've seen a giant grid dedicated for external diffusion. If you're not familiar with what a grid is for, it directs light in a specific direction so it's not spilling all over the place while still maintaining soft lighting and shadows. The other kit that I have works as a negative fill using the black side, or as a bounce board or reflector using the silver side. Negative fill is typically used to deepen shadows and create more contrast, but you can also use this kit to flag light and block it from hitting things you don't want it to. There's an endless amount of possibilities for the silver material, like bouncing the sunlight back into somebody's face for a no light outdoor setup, or bouncing a light off of the reflector through the diffusion for a book light. In this example, I've got the Intellytech X100 using nothing but the stock reflector, and you can see that the shadows are relatively harsh and really sharp. There are some cases where you might want this look, but the majority of the time, the softer the better. If you didn't notice, I have a subtle backlight going here just because it's a pretty traditional setup. This next shot is with only the diffusion material placed between the light and myself. Obviously there's a huge difference here, and the diffusion gives us softer shadows and nicer roll off from light to dark. If you look at the reflection in my eyes with no diffusion, you can see it's more of a pinpoint light, and with diffusion it's just much softer. Ideally you can double diffuse the light to make that reflection and the shadows even softer, and that's something I'll talk about a little bit later. In this next shot, I added the optional grid to the diffusion panel. Grids are mostly used to keep light from spilling where you don't want it to, and you can see that here in the background, but it also changes how soft the shadows are. The shadows are still nice and soft, but you can see a difference in the roll-off, especially in my nose and cheek area. In this shot, I added the negative fill on the opposite side of my face as the key light. Since that stops light from bouncing around and reflecting off the walls into my face on the shadow side, it just makes the shadows a little bit darker. Some rooms don't reflect light all over the place as well, so the difference will be more subtle, but in other cases it'll be really obvious. Lastly, I flipped the second panel around to the silver reflector side and bounced the key light back into the shadows to fill them in a bit. This difference is a lot more obvious, and it gives you more even lighting with less contrast, which can be useful for things like interviews or a less stylized setup. Some of the changes I showed you are subtle and some are more obvious, but that's what makes lighting so fun. More importantly, I think these kits give you everything you need to do to modify the light to create the look that you're after. You can also get these kits with white and gold reflectors, a white and gold and silver stripe reflector, and a light grid mesh. Prices on these kits range from $200 to $380, which honestly I think is a killer deal. DIY diffusion frames are popular, but if you tried to build something comparable to these in size, you'd be spending a lot of money and putting a lot of hours into it. Plus it probably wouldn't be as lightweight, and you wouldn't have the ability to set it up and tear it down nearly as fast. I'm not at all saying you're wasting your time with DIY solutions, but at some point in all our careers, your time is worth more than the cost of these fast frames, and at that point I think they're a no-brainer. I recently filmed a lighting setup tutorial for top-down lighting that you might see in an interrogation scene or a music video or some other dramatic type shot. I'll have a link to that full video here, but I also want to show you some examples from that here as well. With the included clamps, you can hang these frames from 1 or 2 light stands, which is a lot sturdier if you want to do something like I'm going to show you now. I've got my light up high and boomed way out, and without diffusion, you can see that the shadows are really sharp and harsh overall. I put the 5 by 6.5 foot fast frame diffusion material between the light and myself, and it just gives a much more high budget cinematic look. Another thing I love about the fast frames is that you can use them with any type and any brand of light. So you can use them with a COB and stock reflector, or multiple LED light panels if you need the extra output. Even better, you can put a softbox on your light and then shoot that through the diffusion of the fast frame, and that'll just give you extra soft light and eliminate any hot spots that you might get otherwise. You can also use these to block the sun outside and get softer lighting, or place them on an interior window to create a natural light softbox. The flexibility of the fast frames is part of what I think makes them so worthwhile, but they do have some downsides. First, I'd like to see some more diffusion options for these, mostly a 1 full stop diffusion. That way it just helps eliminate the hot spots I talked about, especially if you're shooting a COB with a stock reflector directly into it. Or if I could buy additional 1/3 or 1/2 stop diffusion panels and stack them with the one that it comes with, that would be even better. The other thing is that they're not really a standard size, so you can't buy off-the-shelf materials and easily attach them to these frames. To be fair, changing the material on these panels all the time kind of eliminates the main purpose of them, which is their super fast setup and teardown times. You can fold these down after the initial setup of putting the materials on, so taking them out and putting them away takes less than a minute. Overall, these things work great, save a ton of time, and are relatively expensive compared to the alternatives. So what do you think? Before you go, leave a comment and let me know if you see these fitting into your workflow, or if there's something about them that just makes them a no-go. Links are in the description if you want to check out the fast frames further. That's it for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.